Hello, Bob. Thank you once again for joining us. Good to see you. Let's kick off with the major currency pairs, shall we? With inflation figures, retail figures, and manufacturing figures due to be released next week, it promises to be a busy week ahead for the majors.
Relatively busy week ahead for the majors. For the US dollar, key stats, inflation figures at the start of the week, obviously plenty of interest on inflation. Recent PMI surveys point to a marked increase in input prices, and prices are beginning to be passed on. So, this will draw plenty of interest. Then focus will shift to retail sales figures on Thursday, which are due out alongside weekly jobless claims and Philly Fed manufacturing PMI numbers. Expect jobless claims and retail sales figures to draw the greatest interest. Rounding things up at the end of the week will be consumer sentiment numbers. These are prelim figures for April, so expect plenty of interest there as well. For the euro, busy week. Key stats include industrial production, retail sales and trade figures, and there's also inflation figures for the Eurozone due out in the week. And there are the ZEW economic sentiment figures for Germany and the Eurozone. We've seen plenty of market sensitivity to the ZEW numbers, so expect plenty of interest there as well. For the pound, relatively busy week. Key stats are going to be manufacturing and industrial production figures, but we're also going to be looking at trade data this time around. Marked interest in what impact Brexit is having on trade terms between Britain and the EU and ultimately on the UK economy.
And let's switch our attention now to the commodity currencies. Pretty quiet week ahead, but what key stats should our traders be looking out for?
For the loonie, it's relatively quiet week ahead. Key stats are manufacturing sales and wholesale sales figures. Don't expect too much influence on the loonie there. Focus will remain on crude oil inventory and market sentiment towards the economic recovery. Obviously, COVID-19 remains a downside risk, so expect plenty of interest there that will ultimately support or weigh on demand. For the Aussie dollar, we've got business and consumer sentiment figures. From the RBA perspective, obviously, business investment and consumer consumption are key to support the continued economic recovery. So these numbers will need to show continued improvement to support the optimistic outlook. Later in the week, we've got employment figures that will also draw plenty of attention. Obviously, employment conditions will need to continue to improve to support consumer spending. For the Kiwi dollar, we've got electronic card retail sales and business PMI numbers. Main event of the week, however, is the RBNZ monetary policy decision. Markets are expecting the RBNZ to stand pat, so expect the rate statement to be the key driver midweek.
So the Aussie dollar is the one that we should be keeping an eye out for in the week ahead. How about our Asian giants, Japan and China? What key stats can we expect from them in the week ahead?
For the Japanese yen, no major stats to consider in the week ahead, so that leaves the yen in the hands of market risk sentiment, obviously key areas of geopolitics and COVID-19. For the Chinese one, it's a busy week ahead. We've got trade data at the start of the week. Market's going to be looking for increased exports and increased imports as well to support domestic demand and demand from global economies. End of the week, however, first quarter GDP numbers are going to be the main event. That will have a material impact on the global markets. That comes out alongside fixed asset investment, industrial production, retail sales, and unemployment numbers. Expect that first quarter GDP number to be the key stat of the week, however.
And lastly, geopolitical risk. Still high on the agenda is the trade talks between the US and China. But how will that affect the markets and any other geopolitical risks that we should keep an eye out for?
On the geopolitical risk front, no major shift from what we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Obviously, we need to continue monitoring China-US relations and what impact that is having on global trade terms. And then obviously there's COVID-19, and if there's any further friction, between EU and the UK. Obviously, the EU has recently been blaming AstraZeneca for it falling short on its vaccine targets. So those are the main areas of focus. On the peripheral, we've obviously got Iran and the nuclear agreement. That's one area of also to consider, but I would really be monitoring US-China relations near term, however.
Well, that's all we have time for today, Bob. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you again next time. That was the week ahead with Bob Mason of FX Empire. In the meantime, keep up to date with all the latest developments by following us on all our social media outlets.